Have you ever noticed how certain people simply vanish from social circles, not because of tragedy or conflict, but through a kind of silent dissolution? First, they stop showing up at parties. Then, they cancel plans with growing frequency. Their conversations become increasingly scarce, until one day you realize they're no longer here. This phenomenon is neither accidental nor pathological. It's the natural movement of minds that have crossed an invisible threshold. Like butterflies that can no longer pretend to be caterpillars, these people have discovered something about reality that makes it impossible to sustain the usual social performance. What you are about to understand may shake your perception of belonging, success, and what it truly means to be alive. This is not a manual for isolation, but the anatomy of a transformation that may already be pulsing within you. The question that echoes is devastatingly simple. What happens to an awakened soul in a sleeping society? To understand this silent exodus, we must first recognize what these people have left behind. We live in a civilization built on successive layers of distraction. The typical modern day functions like a machine of amnesia. We wake up to notifications, consume content that makes us feel informed but not transformed, work on tasks that rarely connect with genuine purpose, and relate through conversations that forever dance on the surface. This social architecture is not accidental. It exists to keep the system running smoothly, with each individual too busy to question the fundamental nature of their existence. Small talk about the weather, endless discussions about celebrities, political debates that never reach the roots of the problems, all of it forms a web of noise that traps minds in the trivial. But something extraordinary happens during an awakening of consciousness. It's as if someone adjusted the frequency of a radio that had been picking up only static. Suddenly, conversations about the latest reality show sound like a foreign language. The collective anxiety over fashion trends seems like an incomprehensible tribal dance. What once felt normal now resonates as absurd theater. This is not intellectual superiority or spiritual arrogance. It is a physical inability to pretend genuine interest in what has no substance. Like someone who regained hearing after years of deafness, every empty word now echoes with disturbing clarity. Taking part in these interactions begins to generate a deep existential fatigue. Awakening dissolves the ability for automatic social performance. Before, it was possible to navigate shallow conversations on autopilot, smiling at the right times, showing appropriate concern over superficial matters. Now, every attempt at forced engagement feels like a betrayal of one's own authenticity. This process doesn't happen overnight. First comes the subtle restlessness during empty meetings, then the growing difficulty in sustaining conversations about nothing. Next, the realization that even fun social events leave a bitter taste of wasted time. Finally, the inevitable understanding: it is impossible to return to who you once were. Society interprets this withdrawal as depression, antisocial behavior, or a personal crisis. Family members suggest therapy. Friends express concern. Colleagues label it a difficult phase. But those going through the transformation know it is not an illness. It is precisely the opposite. It is mental health manifesting in a world that confuses normality with sanity. The conflict becomes unbearable. Remain and die slowly from spiritual suffocation, or move toward the unknown that pulses with true life. It is not a rational choice, but a survival instinct of the soul. Like plants that grow toward the light even through concrete, these minds begin instinctively moving away from what suffocates them. This first movement of withdrawal is not a rejection of the world, but a desperate search for authentic reality in a universe of simulacra. What happens next surprises even those experiencing the transformation. The body begins to react in unexpected ways. Environments once tolerable become physically uncomfortable. Shopping malls trigger nausea. Corporate offices generate inexplicable headaches. Loud parties drain energy like invisible vampires sucking vitality. This is not psychological hypersensitivity or newly developed neurosis. It is a profound sensory recalibration, as if someone had lived their entire life wearing sunglasses and suddenly took them off. Every stimulus now strikes with amplified intensity. The awakened mind develops more refined perceptive antennas, picking up frequencies once imperceptible. Crowds carry a tangible, energetic weight. Each person there bears their anxieties, frustrations, fears, and unresolved desires. This collective emotional charge forms a dense, almost breathable atmosphere. Those who have awakened feel it on their skin, literally. Like a sponge submerged in dirty water, they absorb the turbulence of others involuntarily. Superficial conversations begin to sound like aggressive white noise. It's not the content of the words, but the vibration behind them. Gossip carries subtle poison. Constant complaints create fields of negativity. Ego-driven discussions emit discordant frequencies that make the soul contract in self-protection. Awakening brings with it a kind of hyperactive emotional radar. Lies sound like sirens. Manipulation triggers alarm signals. Falseness resonates with physical discomfort. Living this way in conventional social environments is like trying to sleep through a storm. Technically possible, but deeply exhausting. This expanded sensitivity is not a defect to be corrected, but a natural evolution of perception. Like animals sensing earthquakes before humans do, awakened minds detect disturbances in the collective energetic field. They sense conflicts before they erupt. They perceive lies before they are exposed. They feel the general unease of society like low atmospheric pressure before rain. Preserving inner peace becomes a survival priority, not out of selfishness, but necessity. A clear mind requires the right environment to function, just as a delicate plant requires proper soil to grow. Forcing oneself to remain in toxic spaces is like asking a musician to compose a symphony during an explosion. The instinct for retreat emerges naturally. It is not cowardice or social laziness, it is ancestral wisdom in action. Wounded animals seek safe places to heal. Minds in transformation do the same. They seek sanctuaries where they can process their changes without external interference. Silence becomes medicine. Solitude becomes nourishment. Nature offers healing frequencies that urban environments cannot provide. Each moment away from social chaos allows the new sensitivity to stabilize and find its natural rhythm. This movement is not an escape from responsibility, but responsibility to oneself taken to the extreme. To recognize that certain energies are toxic and to deliberately distance oneself from them is a radical act of courage in a culture that values sociability above sanity. The outside world interprets it as pathological antisociality, but those living the process know it is exactly the opposite. It is self-love so deep it refuses to accept anything less than genuine authenticity. It is saying no to the world in order to say yes to one's own soul. During this necessary withdrawal, something even more revolutionary happens. The old metrics of value collapse like castles of sand. What once defined success, salary, position, social recognition, loses relevance with frightening speed. It's like waking from a dream where you believed paper money was real gold. The race for accumulation reveals itself as a cosmic hamster wheel. More money to buy more things that bring no satisfaction. Higher status to impress people whose approval doesn't feed the soul. More possessions that take up space but don't fill the existential void. The futility of this pursuit becomes so obvious that continuing to participate in it would be self-betrayal. A new existential mathematics emerges. Free time is worth more than overtime. Silence weighs more than applause. A contemplated sunset is worth more than 1,000 virtual likes. Deep conversations with one person surpass networking with hundreds. Quality of presence becomes the only currency that truly matters. This revolution of values doesn't happen through philosophy or theory. It is born from the direct experience of what nourishes versus what depletes. It is discovering that 5 minutes meditating in nature restore more than an entire weekend of entertainment. That reading a profound book satisfies more than consuming digital content for hours. That cooking a simple meal with full attention generates more joy than an expensive dinner without presence. Awakening reveals the difference between being busy and being alive, between having a packed schedule and having a full life, between being productive and being creative, between conquering the world and finding yourself. Once perceived, this distinction can no longer be ignored. Society measures progress by speed and volume. How many tasks you completed, how many commitments you fulfilled, how much information you processed, but awakened minds discover that real progress happens in contemplative slowness, in the pause between thoughts, in the empty space where intuition can finally emerge. Withdrawing from the frenetic pace is not laziness, it's recognition that true productivity is born of deep rest, that genuine insights emerge from creative boredom, that innovative solutions arise from minds not constantly stimulated. This shift in perspective generates familial misunderstanding. Relatives question why someone would waste talents by rejecting promotions. Friends can't understand why one prefers a solitary walk to a social event. Colleagues label as lack of ambition what is, in truth, ambition redirected toward what truly matters. The disappearance from conventional society is simultaneously a reappearance in subtler dimensions. Greater connection with natural cycles, deeper relationships with fewer people, work aligned with purpose rather than mere financial survival, life built around meaning rather than social conventions. This transformation demands tremendous courage, leaving the well-marked path to explore unknown territory, trading familiar security for the adventure of discovering who we really are outside imposed social roles. If you recognize this inner calling, if you feel this growing restlessness with the superficial, leave a like on this video and write in the comments, "I feel the calling." Your soul may be preparing the ground for this very same journey back to what is real. The resistance these people encounter is neither accidental nor new. Social systems are organisms that seek homeostasis. Any element that questions the established balance generates antibodies of rejection. Awakened minds represent an unintentional threat to the collective architecture based on conformity and consumption. The incompatibility manifests in subtle but consistent ways. In professional environments, they are labeled as not fitting the company culture. In family circles, they receive epithets like complicated or difficult to deal with. Among old friends, they become that person who changed and got weird. These labels do not describe character flaws, but natural reactions of a social organism confronted with elements it can no longer assimilate. The economic system depends on compulsive consumers who buy packaged happiness. It depends on workers who trade time for money without questioning the real value of that transaction. It depends on citizens too distracted to critically examine the structures that govern their lives. Awakened people disturb this machinery simply by existing with different priorities. This dynamic echoes throughout human history. Socrates was condemned for corrupting the youth, in truth, for teaching people to question authorities and conventions. Jesus was crucified not for preaching love, but for challenging structures of religious and social power. Galileo was persecuted not for doing science, but for revealing truths that threatened established cosmologies. Buddha abandoned palace and wealth to seek understanding of human suffering, a move that must have seemed madness to his contemporaries. Lao Tzu withdrew from Chinese society to contemplate the nature of the Tao. Rumi found God in solitude after losing everything he valued socially. These were not isolated cases, but a repeated pattern across cultures and eras. In the last century, figures like Thoreau chose a cabin in the forest instead of conventional urban life. Gandhi renounced a prosperous bureaucratic career to dedicate himself to social transformation through radical simplicity. Krishnamurti dissolved spiritual organizations that worshipped him to teach individual self-knowledge. Today, this movement continues, but dispersed and silent. Successful executives who leave everything behind to cultivate organic gardens. Doctors who abandon lucrative clinics to practice holistic medicine in rural communities. University professors who trade academic tenure for a contemplative life. Artists who reject commercial fame to create authentic works in obscurity. Contemporary society labels these choices as midlife crises, depression, or financial irresponsibility. Media presents stories of people who left everything as entertainment, not as a symptom of something larger happening in collective consciousness. But these individual movements are raindrops before the storm. They signal a tectonic shift in the human psyche. A growing number of people are discovering that conventional success does not satisfy deep spiritual needs. That technological progress has not brought progress in happiness or meaning. that digital connectivity has created paradoxical existential disconnection. The disappearance is not individual pathology, but an evolutionary response to a civilization that has lost contact with fundamental values. It is the immune system of human consciousness reacting to chronic cultural toxicity. It is a movement back to sanity in a culture that confuses normality with mental health. Recognizing these historical precedents offers reassuring context for those undergoing this transformation. They are neither alone nor going insane. They are following an ancestral impulse that has always emerged during periods of civilizational transition. What happens next surprises even those experiencing the process. The initial withdrawal, which seemed like an act of escape, reveals itself as preparation for something much greater. Like a butterfly that needs the solitude of the cocoon to complete its metamorphosis, these minds use retreat to integrate their new perception of reality. This period of seclusion is not the end of the journey, but its true beginning. Away from constant distractions, collective mental noise, and pressures of conformity, something extraordinary can finally emerge. Clarity that was once obscured by external chaos begins to crystallize. Authentic purpose, once suffocated by the expectations of others, finds space to breathe. Personal transformation inevitably becomes a mirror for others. Family, friends, and acquaintances observe these changes with a mix of curiosity, concern, and something deeper, unconscious envy. They see someone who had the courage to abandon the rat race, who chose authenticity over social approval, who prioritized inner peace over outward status. This observation awakens uncomfortable questions in those who remain within the system. If it is possible to live differently, why do they remain trapped in the same routines? If there is an alternative to constant anxiety, why do they accept stress as normal? If another person found meaning outside the conventional structure, what does that say about their own choices? The discomfort generated is not malice, but psychological self-protection. Recognizing that there is another path forces a confrontation with one's own dissatisfaction. It is easier to label the one who left as lost or irresponsible than to admit they may have found something missing in one's own life. But for some, the seed of curiosity is planted. They begin to ask questions that once seemed irrelevant. What truly makes me happy? Am I living my life or the life others expect of me? What would happen if I stopped trying to impress and started trying to express myself? This mirror effect works even without active proselytizing. The mere existence of someone living authentically challenges others to examine their own authenticity. Just as a radiant person exposes by contrast those who are wilting inside, a life aligned with purpose questions lives built only around obligations. During the retreat, the depth of understanding about human nature expands dramatically. Free from mandatory social superficialities, these people develop a sharp perception of the real motivations behind behaviors. They learn to read emotional energy like an open book. They understand psychological patterns that once went unnoticed. This wisdom accumulated in solitude prepares the ground for an eventual return, not as who they once were, but as a guide for others navigating similar crises. The hermit becomes an oracle. The retreat becomes training to serve those still trapped in the labyrinth they themselves escaped. Not everyone who withdraws returns to serve directly. Some continue living simple and contemplative lives, contributing through their peaceful presence in the world. Others return as therapists, teachers, artists, or healers, using their journey through darkness to illuminate the path for others. The courage required for this movement cannot be underestimated. It means killing the old version of oneself without any guarantee of who will emerge from the process. It means accepting the misunderstanding of those most loved. It means trading familiar security for the uncertain adventure of self-discovery. But this death of the false self is simultaneously the birth of the real self. And this real self has the ability to touch others in ways the performative self never could. Authenticity is contagious. Courage inspires courage. Freedom awakens hunger for freedom in those still imprisoned. What you have just witnessed is not a story about people fleeing the world. It is an account of minds returning home after a long exile. They did not disappear. They reappeared in the place they were always meant to be, aligned with their essential nature. This silent movement, represents more than an individual choice. It is a symptom of collective awakening happening on the margins of civilization. Each person who chooses authenticity over approval, each soul who prioritizes peace over productivity, each being who dares to live differently is contributing to the greater transformation of human consciousness. The disappearance of these people from conventional society is in fact their appearance in the real universe. They have discovered that true belonging does not come from accepting imposed roles, but from finding a genuine place in the wider cosmic order. Their journey does not end in solitude, it begins there. In silence, they find an authentic voice. In separation, they discover real connection. In moving away from the false, they draw closer to the true. Retreat becomes preparation for deeper service to the world. This calling may be pulsing within you right now. Perhaps you already feel the restlessness, the growing discomfort with superficialities, the hunger for something more substantial than entertainment and consumption. If you have made it this far, write "Awakened" in the comments so I know you absorbed this entire reflection. Subscribe to the channel for more content that challenges the ordinary and reveals the extraordinary hidden in everyday life. Your soul recognizes truth, even if it does not yet fully understand what it means.